So yesterday I covered some positive news about the Activision Blizzard protests in regards to its culture of harassment and discrimination, where employees have been going out of their way to organize and issue demands to executives who have just been far too complacent to issues that have been permeating the company for decades. And I've shown this before, where they demanded an end to mandatory arbitration, better recruiting practices and policies, the publication of data for compensation as to mitigate the pay disparity that's been prevalent at the company, and to hire a third-party entity to audit ABK's reporting structure, HR department, and executive staff to actually hold them accountable. And finally, yesterday, we saw Activision Blizzard cave to some of these demands, while there's still much work left to do to enact all of the changes that need to happen. This is still moving the needle. And in a letter made public by CEO Bobby Kotick, it was announced that there are a couple of changes that happen. First one being that they're launching a new zero-tolerance harassment policy, which I don't know how that constitutes a change when Activision Blizzard was always supposed to have a zero-tolerance policy against harassment, but we'll see if they'll be a lot more strict about enforcing accountability, though executives obviously won't hold themselves accountable for their negligence. The second bullet point outlines greater efforts to diversify the workforce, except that alone isn't enough. The diversified workforce actually need to be treated fairly across the board, whereas, the issue right now at the company is discrimination with gender as well as race, but women in particular have had the worst of it. But a really big one is number 3, the waiving of required arbitration of sexual harassment and discrimination claims, which essentially allows employees to actually take disputes like this to court rather than having to go through the company's hearing process that tends to favor the corporation, given the corporation has control over that process. So now there's a greater chance for victims to seek out accountability in a more fair manner. And then for number 4, we got an increase to visibility on pay equity. With pay disparity being a major issue at Activision Blizzard, more transparency on this information would make it easier to spot pay disparity and therefore discourage that from happening. And a better ABK, the alliance of Activision Blizzard King workers who've been protesting against the company and making demands, have marked this as a big win, while acknowledging that this is still the early stages of this war, if you will, and that they must continue to push for better practices in the industry. And the reason I bring this up for today's video, which is more tied to Ubisoft, is because this has gotten the ball rolling. When a major development happens like this, it inspires other workers from other companies to also kind of take up arms, if you will, and also issue demands and push for change that is slowly but surely happening as the word of mouth continues to spread, as this fire continues to be fueled, as voices continue to rise and hopefully be heard at some point down the line. And a better ABK has been in support of Ubisoft workers trying to push for positive change by retweeting a statement that a better Ubisoft's official Twitter page posted. And I'll get to this in a bit, but recall that the exposés on Ubisoft in regards to its culture of abuse, harassment, discrimination, misconduct, you name it, happened even before Activision Blizzard. But aside from, Yves Guillemot occasionally coming out and saying how he's dedicated to ensuring that there's a better work culture and that there are overhauls happening within the company, aside from Ubisoft talking the talk, unfortunately walking the walk is another matter entirely, and that's where Ubisoft has woefully failed these past years. It was only back in July of 2021 that Ubisoft expressed solidarity for Activision Blizzard employees' walkout. The walkout was a result of Fran Townsend's awful statement to employees, basically dismissing their issues with the company and stating that, the facts have been distorted, the DFEH doesn't know what it's talking about, when employees have been corroborating all of that information. Ubisoft employees back then signed a letter that called for industry-wide action and expressed solidarity for Activision Blizzard. Now, Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot responded by claiming that important progress has been made and that plenty of solutions have been implemented, but his response was one that was not well received. The open letter has not gone down well, according to this PC Gamer article published the following day on July 30th. Ubisoft staff say they're waiting for real fundamental change at the company. Again, Ubisoft has been talking up all the changes, but employees have not been feeling those changes, feeling as though much of their reports on harassment that they faced has gone completely ignored or just kind of gone into the ether. And at the time, Ubisoft workers put it best when the CEO tried to placate them by noting how there are now open communications channels to communicate with, managers and certain leaders in certain departments and positions about potential harassment and abuse. To that, they said an invitation to reach out to company management personally is not the same as having a collective seat at the table. Very well put. Now, fast forward to much more recently, October 21st, 2021, and there's still reports that Ubisoft has not been doing much about harassment reports and acting upon people's complaints and their submission of testimonials surrounding their harassment experiences. The focus of this particular article is someone named Valerie, which is a pseudonym to keep the employee anonymous, who has been sexually harassed at the company, has faced racist remarks, and despite her reporting this over and over again, nothing was done. The harassment happened again last year, but after filing complaints to multiple reporting tools and completing half a dozen interviews with supervisors and HR managers. And keep in mind that by this time, Ubisoft's awful work culture had already been exposed, and Ubisoft had claimed that they're gonna make some major changes and overhauls and listen to employees more. Valerie never received a resolution to her case. Earlier this year, she decided to resign. Even today, employees are reporting discriminatory pay, abusers getting promoted, and being sworn to secrecy about their complaints. Employees being told to shush, trying to silence their voices to not make the company look bad. Going back to Valerie, some of the inappropriate experiences were relayed here. She was asked if she keeps sex toys at her desk. The article then proceeds by quoting a blog post published by Ubisoft employees who have taken to complain about Ubisoft's lack of action. By refusing to include employees in the feedback and decision-making process on harassment, Ubisoft management shows that it never had any intention to do more than communicate to save face. And that's really all Ubisoft has been doing pretty much. And I'll link to that full blog post in the descriptions below, but here's a glimpse of what that looks like. The headline of this blog post reads, "Harassment. Ubisoft chooses delaying tactics and communication campaigns instead of protecting employees." Yeah, pretty much. And amidst talks about how Activision Blizzard has recently capitulated to some of employees' demands, Ubisoft, on the other hand, has not capitulated one bit. Ubisoft has yet to set up a meeting to discuss worker demands. There have been a series of remote presentations made across the company, spearheaded by two executives within the company. One of them is Rashi Sika, the recently appointed VP of Global Diversity and Inclusion, and then the other person is in the position of Chief People Officer, Anika Grant. But according to one of Kotaku sources, they weren't addressing anything properly and basically saying, trust the process. The process that has so far proven woefully ineffective. Now, on top of all of that information we got from employees speaking out, in large part being fueled by the movement at Activision Blizzard and the progress that's being made there, a more recent development happened yesterday, October 29th, 2021. The headline here from PC Gamer speaks for itself. Ubisoft workers demand swifter action from leadership after Activision concedes to employee demands. This was expressed in a statement published by A Better Ubisoft, which I referenced earlier in the video, which we'll take a look at now. And it basically outlines the lack of substantial progress that Activision Blizzard has been able to achieve in 3 months, whereas Ubisoft, they've been at this for, over a year now, however much time has passed. So I'd like to go through this statement and share my thoughts. It reads as follows. ABU would like to thank Anika Grant, Chief People Officer of Ubisoft, for responding to each of our key demands in a recent internal presentation. There were some welcome acknowledgments in the presentation of management failures in both the consistency of the complaints process and lack of communication with some of the whistleblowers and witnesses. Beyond that, however, there was no new information nor any steps to meet our demands. 16 months since Ubisoft was forced to take limited action following public posts on Twitter. You talk about a strategic roadmap of change for HR that you are getting ready to start rolling out, giving no timeline for delivery nor any hint of what those changes will be. It sure sounds like those roadmaps you get for disastrously launched AAA releases where everything inevitably gets delayed, promises are not kept. Only yesterday, Activision Blizzard committed to increase their number of women and non-binary workers by 50% within 5 years. They have promised to invest $250 million to accelerate opportunities for diverse talent and to release annual salary transparency reports, meeting some of the ABK Workers Alliance demands is on top of the waiving of arbitration for harassment cases. In just 3 months, it seems that they have listened to the concerns of employees and acted on them. I wouldn't go that far. This is very much Activision Blizzard in face-saving mode. The amount of actions that they've taken that goes contrary to employees' goals, that comes at the expense of employees, like hiring a union-busting firm WilmerHale to oversee employees' complaints and harassment reports. The fact that they've been actively destroying evidence, or the way they've been using coercive tactics to dissuade employees from speaking out about what goes on within the company, among many other things. The statements that executives have released dismissing many of the claims before the heat really came to them, and then they overturned their previous statements and are now pretending like they give a shit and that they're listening, even though it took so much to get to where Activision, Blizzard, King's employees are at now with the capitulation of executives to their demands. It took a while to get there, so I would hardly say that ABK is actively listening to workers. They're just more navigating ways to save face now that they're forced to save face. But it's true, more progress seems to have been made within Activision Blizzard King than within Ubisoft, and this statement comes out and says, while our demands are not identical, many overlap and could be addressed through similar actions just as swiftly. You offer nothing more than your assurance that all investigations are impartial, all sanctions are appropriate, and the victims and witnesses are protected, while offering us no evidence, involvement, or oversight in any part of the process. Ubisoft's basically been like, just trust us, we got you. But they've already had an extensive history of acting untrustworthily, and now the way they're handling this whole situation with the lack of impact, positive impact to the company's work culture, even after all this time and after all the exposés. I mean, how the hell is anyone supposed to trust these assurances that are even now are not panning out? You suggest that you're giving us a seat at the table by relaunching our global employee satisfaction surveys, but a survey is not a seat at the table. The fact that Ubisoft executives had the audacity to suggest that a survey would be a satisfactory way to bring employees to the seat of the table is freaking insulting, and really goes to show how little fucks this company gives about its employees, or how few regrets they have about the way they've handled things. They're just trying to save face and are not regretful, do not feel any shame, just want to bury this instead of addressing it. You stress the need to listen to all employees, but unfortunately, when the minority of workers come from underrepresented backgrounds, their needs and concerns can become buried by people who are unlikely to face harassment, discrimination, or abuse. People in positions of power who are defended by people in even higher positions of power. The statement then says, we hope you agree that no abuse should be tolerated, and those of us who are the victims, reporters, and witnesses should be listened to with respect and never dismissed as a minority concern. While we welcome your responses and this initial step in our dialogue, our key demands have not been met. Only when you listen to the victims and fully address our concerns will we finally build a better Ubisoft. At this point, it feels like there's no other option than to take action that would disrupt Ubisoft as a company, similarly to how Activision Blizzard engaged in that walkout and continued to share stories to the press, to keep the ball rolling, to keep the conversation going, to put fuel to the fire, to keep the fire lit and hot and blazing. And that's what Ubisoft employees, I think, need to do. They need to show some force of action that will cost Ubisoft money, because that's ultimately what these corporations will listen to. If there's a potential for something to lose the money, then they'll take action to try to counteract that and pretend like they cared about an issue when it's all about self-preservation. Some kind of strike where everyone refuses to work for a couple days, or some kind of walkout, whatever. Anything that would raise eyebrows, that would draw press attention, and that would make Ubisoft sweat about the potential controversies they could cause, that could have them lose investors, whatever, stuff like that. All of that is what's going to get Ubisoft to listen. So we'll see how all of this develops, but this is why it's important to keep reporting on this stuff, why it's important for employees to continue disrupting because word spreads and then it inspires other entities to engage in similar types of protests. And once that ball gets rolling, the kind of change that's being demanded at Activision Blizzard could become the new normal as major corporations adopt similar policies and ways of doing things as a result of employees' protests and strikes and revolts. And that's how we pave the road for landscape-wide change, for an entire industry's change. The goal is to make these companies aware that they cannot get away with this, and by setting a precedent where a major corporation like Activision Blizzard doesn't actually get away with it, actually face consequences from employees, from workers, from government organizations, from lawsuits alike, that's when other companies will also be like, oh crap, we should maybe not do this anymore, because turns out maybe we can't get away with it after all, we won't keep getting away with it. And that fear of potential retaliation and the potential resulting loss of revenue and profits, that's what's actually going to scare executives enough to enforce the demands of employees and just generally positive change where they're more conscious about the treatment of employees in their work environment. And to see employees from two major gaming corporations, Activision Blizzard and Ubisoft, working together in solidarity, expressing support for each other, issuing similar demands, and not giving up, continuing to relent, that's definitely not nothing. And this is the biggest this kind of conversation has been in the gaming landscape. And the hope is that it only grows bigger until corporations and executives have no choice but to bend the knee. We'll see how it goes. But until then, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Ubisoft's statements and their support for Activision Blizzard's cause, and them pleading to Ubisoft's executives to follow in a similar vein and to enact changes faster and to enact changes that are more effective. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.